Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Becca Subzalian. I'm an Apache Latina and member of Portland's Native community. I also serve on the board of Planned Parenthood Columbia-Willamette. I'm proud to serve an organization that prioritizes partnership with Native nations and the Native community. A symbol of this commitment is a land acknowledgement. These statements bring awareness of and visibility to the first peoples of our collective home. The struggle for recognition, self-determination, and access to reproductive and sexual health care and education in Indian country is ongoing because colonization is ongoing. It is popular to talk of decolonizing our movements and spaces. Land acknowledgements can present an initial step on that path. At this time, I would like to ask Camila Heeson, our Vice President of Education and Community Partnerships, to open our time together, acknowledging the Indigenous people of the land we gather on today.
Thank you for the introduction, Becca. Hello. Thank you for choosing to be with us today. Planned Parenthood Columbia-Willamette 7 health centers are on the traditional lands of Chinook, Clackamas, Kalapuya, Malala, and Atfalati people. While many of these tribes historically did not have distinct boundaries, we're currently standing on the ancestral land of the Chinook Nation, which continues to fight for restoration as federally recognized tribe. Our wider service region is traditionally land of dozens of tribes, including the reservations of the Confederate Tribes of Grand Ronde, the Confederate Tribes of the Warm Springs, the Confederate Tribes of Umatilla, the Confederate Tribes of Siletz, the Burns Paiute, the Kalamas Tribes, and the Cowlitz people. Additionally, Multnomah County, where we're here today, is home to a vibrant Native community, representing about 400 different tribal nations across the country. We recognize the original people who are the traditional stewards of this land, as well as the enduring relationships that exist between Indigenous people and their traditional territories. As Becca said, such statements become truly meaningful only when coupled with authentic relationships and sustained commitment. We, therefore, at Planned Parenthood, commit to move beyond words into programs and actions that fully embody a commitment to Indigenous rights and cultural equity. In all of our health centers, we provide access to reproductive and sexual health services to patients that might be limited by the Indian Health Service. We also provide compassionate and understanding services to Two-Spirit patients. The education team has the privilege of working closely with and learning from the Native American Youth and Family Center. We're working together to inform and sustain sex education for all public students. We use our platforms to promote Indigenous causes and events. For example, Missing and Murder Indigenous Women, which is a Portland-based organization with a national purpose. In an effort to further raise awareness towards inviting and honoring the truth, our website includes a land acknowledgement page with resources. The Equity and Inclusion team is working continuously to educate our staff on the history of this land and the issues affecting Indigenous communities. particularly when related to the broad umbrella of reproductive justice. Therefore, we invite you to learn alongside us and create greater public consciousness of Native sovereignty and cultural rights, correcting the stories and practices that erase Indigenous peoples' history and culture, which is an initial step towards decolonization and reconciliation. And we can always do more as an organization, as individuals. So thank you for joining us in this process. Thank you. Now I would like to invite to the stage the Attorney General, Ellen Rosenblum.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Camelia. That was really lovely and so important. Thank you to Planned Parenthood Columbia-Willamette for hosting all of us today. I am so honored to be here to welcome everyone, including so many friends and personal heroes. I'd like to give a special thank you to the elected officials in the audience and invite you to stand so we can recognize you. But I have to give you guys a warning. Hold your applause, or we'll be here all day because there's so many and they're so amazing. So we're gonna recognize all these leaders with one big round of applause at the end, but I would ask you all to remain standing. So here they are. Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici, Congressmen Earl Blumenauer and Kurt Schrader, State Senators Ginny Burdick, Shamia Fagan, Rob Wagner, and Lou Frederick. State Representatives Margaret Doherty, Rob Nose, Andrea Salinas, and Janine Solman. County Commissioners Sharon Myron, Sushila Jayapal, and Martha Schrader. City Councilor Eddie Morales. City Auditor Mary Hull Caballero. District Attorney John Hummel from Bend. School Board members Amanda Orozco Beach, Sonia McKenzie, Yesenia Delgado, Sahar Moronovich, and Ricky Ruiz. Former Secretary of State Jean Atkins. Former state senators Jane Cease, Jackie Dingfelder, and Diane Rosenbaum. Former state representatives Jennifer Williamson, George Amy, and Mary Nolan. If I didn't read your name and you are an elected official, stand up too. And let's hear it for all of our amazing Great. Thank you for standing with Planned Parenthood and for all you do to protect and promote access to reproductive and sexual health care in our community, our state, and across the nation. PPCW has been a solid pillar for Oregonians for decades, promoting reproductive health, providing life-changing care and education, and protecting our access every day. So I can't imagine a better place to be than with this amazing room full of friends and supporters assembled here to reflect on the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. PPCW stands as a testament to what we've fought for and won since even before 1973, and why Oregon continues to provide a remarkable model for the rest of the country. While many other states have chipped away at reproductive freedoms in recent years, here in our state, we've focused on expanding access to comprehensive care. The services Planned Parenthood delivers to our community are essential, but its mission to ensure every American has access to comprehensive reproductive health care still faces daunting hurdles. And right now, PPCW faces direct attacks from the Trump administration. I am so proud to fight alongside you on the front lines of this battle. We will not compromise on access to health care. As just one example, you know this, Oregon is leading 21 states in challenging the president's Title X gag rule. That rule clearly has as its goal to cut off Planned Parenthood Columbia-Willamette from the tens of thousands of patients who rely on its healthcare services each year. The federal government's unceasing attacks on our basic freedoms is reprehensible, but please rest assured, so long as Planned Parenthood stands for us, I will stand beside you, and we will show up in court. We will protect our right to safe and legal abortion, and we will make sure we don't go back. But behind strategy and politics, let's remember how important it is to convene and to do what our speaker today, Judith Arcana, calls small group work, so that all of us are prepared to speak with assurance, intelligence, and compassion in fulfilling our goal to move forward. It takes a diverse and broad coalition to make sure we don't go back. It's eminently clear each of us in this room has a unique part to play in the ongoing effort. We are in this journey together. So thank you for being here to celebrate PPCW and the case that gave people all over America the right to make our own personal decisions about our bodies and our lives. Now, please join me in welcoming Kevin Diaz, the chair of the PPCW board.
Thank you, Becca and Camelia, and thank you, Attorney General Rosenblum, for your warm welcome. My name is Kevin Diaz, and I have the honor of serving as the chair of Planned Parenthood Columbia-Willamette's Board of Directors. On behalf of the PPCW board, staff members, volunteers, and the 47,000 patients who rely on us, thank you for being with us today at our 2020 annual luncheon. Last year, we saw legislatures across the country pass extreme abortion bans in rapid succession, turning back the clock on progress to a time much too reminiscent of the pre-Roe era, when women and people who needed abortions were forced to go underground and create their own networks to keep themselves safe. That's why we felt compelled to invite this year's keynote speaker, Judith Arcana, to share her experience as a Jane in Chicago. We must learn all we can from our wise elders to face today's challenges. Some of those lessons we've already learned. We know that now is the time to raise our voices. Now is the time to be loud in our support for Planned Parenthood. And now is the time to stand with the rights of our patients, young people, and community, because we won't go back. We will continue to provide our patients with the compassionate care they deserve, no matter their immigration status, race, gender identity, sexual orientation, or ability. We will continue to promote comprehensive sex education programs for young people, engaging in open and honest conversations about birth control, healthy relationships, inclusivity, and consent. And no matter what, we will continue to protect access to sexual and reproductive health care, which includes safe and legal abortion for all women and people who need it. Now, we couldn't do this work without our sponsors. I want to thank these exceptionally generous individuals, companies, and organizations who stand with our patients and help make it possible for us to realize our mission. Again, please hold your applause until the end, and then we'll have one large round of applause for everyone. A huge thank you to our premier sponsors, Samantha Richardson and Christine and David Vernier. We are so grateful for your commitment to PPCW, and we are thrilled to announce that they've offered $105,000 in matching funds for all donations raised in the room today. Our presenting sponsor, Evans Van Buren, former board member and Luncheon Committee member who helped make today's event possible. Our sponsors, Oregon Health and Sciences University, Compassion and Choices, David Cook and Mary Overgaard, former board member Susan Hammer, Janet Hoffman and Associates, Schwabe Williamson and Wyatt, Arlene Schnitzer, Green Gables Design and Restoration, board member Rabbi Rachel Joseph, Rosemarie Rosenfeld, former board member Dick Solomon, and Lawyers for Choice. Thank you for in-kind support from Andy Petkus Photography, LNS Captioning, Morel Inc., DB Dessert Company, Hilton Portland Downtown, and Solar Productions. Thank you to Sharon Brenner, Sydney Baer, and Kate Barker Swindell for your continued work on the Luncheon Committee, and to the table captains and hosts. I'd also like to thank the powerful voices in this room, our guests who are faith leaders, nonprofit partners, and community activists. We are proud to stand with you and fight for the rights of all people because we are stronger together. Now, please join me in welcoming to the stage Ann Udall, PPC President and CEO.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Attorney General Rosenblum, for being here with today and your amazing leadership. And I also just want to extend a huge thank you to all the elected officials in the room for the leadership that you show us in both Oregon and Washington, moving us forward. And I'd also like to just acknowledge that today my fellow CEO who leads the other Planned Parenthood affiliate, Lisa Gardner, Planned Parenthood Southwestern Oregon, has also joined us today. So thank you, Ellen. But my biggest thank you goes to all of you for being here today. Welcome to our 2020 annual luncheon. My name is Ann Udall, and I am deeply honored and deeply proud to serve as the president and CEO of Planned Parenthood Columbia-Willamette. Thank you. We are proud to say that we are the largest provider of sexual and reproductive health care and sex education in Oregon and Southwest Washington. This is, get this, the 18th year of our annual luncheon. We started out with over 400 guests, and we are now over 800. Wow, how cool is that? As has been mentioned, we hold our annual luncheon in January for a very specific reason: to honor and uphold the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court ruling made on January 22nd, 1973, 47 years ago. And that ruling affirmed that access to safe and legal abortion is a constitutional right. Let me say that again, a constitutional right. As Ellen and Kevin have highlighted, this right is at risk like never before. The right to a safe and legal abortion is under attack. The right to make decisions about our bodies and our health is under attack. And the right to have evidence-based sex education is also under attack. I want to highlight a few challenges that we've faced this year. The current administration, which will not be named, is filling our courts with federal judges at a rapid, unprecedented rate who are anti-choice, anti-LGBTQ, anti-immigrant, anti-voting rights, and anti-women. Have I left anybody out? These appointments ensure that our judiciary will grow even more hostile to people who already face systemic barriers due to racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, and classism. And as of today, as we sit in this room, 43 states, which is over 80% of the states in our country, have restricted access to abortion at specific stages of pregnancy. These laws are extremely barbaric. They force a patient to wait up to 72 hours for no reason, or to have unnecessary tests, or they gag doctors from even mentioning abortion as an option available to them. We are seeing the effects of these laws at PPCW, where in 2019, we provided abortion care to patients from 21 states outside of Oregon and Washington seeking the care they cannot get anywhere else. And in last year, we've seen an increased presence at local school board meetings in Oregon and Washington of individuals advocating against sex education, even though we know two things. We know, get this, that abstinence-only education doesn't work. And we also know that evidence-based sex education is directly related, not indirectly, but directly related to decreased rates of unintended pregnancies. So despite these constant challenges, we refuse to lose our focus on what Planned Parenthoods throughout this country do every day. We provide high-quality sex education to our communities, and we provide compassionate care in all 50 states to millions of patients who walk through our door. As we say in our healthcare clinics, care no matter what. So, as you can hear the theme, and I'm going to sum it up again for you in 5 words, we won't go back ever. And what I'm going to ask that is, because we're, having a party and we're all together and, the spirit of this gathering is always raucous and wonderful, I'm going to ask you to join me in a little choral statement. I want you to join with me loud and proud. We won't go back ever. You ready? We won't go back ever. Thank you. And the reason we won't go back is because we're Planned Parenthood and we always move forward. We move forward because retreat is never an option for us. Because currently national support for abortion access has never been higher. And most importantly, because millions of Americans and thousands of Oregonians and Washingtonians depend on us for health care and sex education. So, in fact, we're not retreating. PPCW is expanding our care. Here's some things that I'd like to share with you. Last year, we saw more patients than we have in 6 years. We offered, medication abortion. We had 40 patients access medication abortion through our new telemedicine service, expanding access beyond the concrete walls of our healthcare centers through secure video conferencing with our providers, and that number continues to grow daily. We expanded PrEP, which is a daily pill to protect people at risk of HIV, to all of our 7 health centers. We also expanded hormone provision for gender affirmation to our Milwaukee Health Center, making it the 4th PPC location to offer this service for our transgender and gender nonconforming patients. And thanks to the tireless work of our advocacy arms, Planned Parenthood Advocates of Oregon and Planned Parenthood Votes Northwest in Hawaii, and all of our community and political partners, Oregon and Washington continue to lead the way with the nation's most progressive reproductive health care policy, including the best laws in the country for abortion access. Yes. And finally this year, we go forward we will open the LCH Hillman East Portland Health Center replacing our very well lived in, to say the least, Southeast Portland location. This new health center is going to expand access to critical sexual and reproductive health care in East Portland. Our new center will have more exam rooms, and it will be a welcoming space that offers a multi-language, community-centered patient experience in an area that has a high need for these services. I would, with the rest of you, I'd like to take a moment to thank the Hillman family members who have joined us today. Amber, Juliet, Summer, please stand. Stand. We're proud to be able to expand access for our communities, and challenges are still ahead. I mean, we are Planned Parenthood, right? But if there's one thing that I know, it's that in the Planned Parenthood universe, we always choose hope. There's no time or space for discouragement or giving up, because to lose hope is to let the bad guys win. It's just that simple. And so I choose hope because I work alongside the most dedicated, passionate people I've ever encountered. Our staff, our volunteers, our board members, both past and present, our community partners who show up every day for our patients. And I want to take a moment. If you're a staff member, if you're a board member, either past or present, will you please stand so we can also thank you for your commitment. I also choose hope because our patients never stop telling us what it means to receive their health care at Planned Parenthood. I choose hope because we all live in Oregon and Washington, where we are a beacon of hope for many, many people who do not be as lucky as we are. And finally, I choose hope because all of you embrace action and reject complacency. I mean, really, when we throw a party, you always show up, and you show up with enthusiasm and passion and applause and money and support. It's so wonderful. So what I want to say to 800 of my closest friends, our closest friends, I just want to extend my gratitude to each one of you for rejecting complacency and for supporting us in these unprecedented times. So one more time together, those 5 words, remember they're on your program, you can see. Join me, we won't go back ever. We go forward because we're Planned Parenthood. Thank you. Thank you. So I am pleased to introduce our next speaker. She's a very special person who has worked on the front lines of abortion access and reproductive health care for many years. She is a co-founder of Oregon's Network for Reproductive Options, a longtime board member of the National Network for Abortion Funds, and a founding board member and volunteer for the funding hotline of Northwest Abortion Access. She has worked in abortion care and is currently a public health nurse. She is also a personal friend to our wonderful keynote speaker. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Kate Weck. Kate.
Hello, thank you so much. I am just so honored to welcome and share my friend Judith with you all today. I first met Judith in 2005, shortly after her book of poems, What If Your Mother, was published. I was on the board of Network for Reproductive Options, as you heard, and she reached out to us offering her voice and her time for an event. And we took her up on her offer, of course, how could we not? We were such fans. She was a Jane. She was a part of the movement that really inspired our work in abortion funding. So we had a poetry reading, and it was amazing. As Judith's poems filled the air that evening and remained in my head for weeks afterwards, they lifted me up and fortified me in my work as a provider and advocate. Her writing gives voice to the unique and universal experiences of people facing unplanned pregnancy, pregnancy loss, parenting, abortion, and more. Her work from the perspective as a Jane gives us a glimpse of how ordinary people really do extraordinary things and able to make the world a more just, equitable, and kind place to be. Her work reminds us that being able to plan the spacing and size of our families is an incredible act of self-love that should never be minimized and should be accessible to all. Judith herself and her life's work illustrate exactly why we are not going back. Currently, of course, as we know, we are facing more barriers to abortion and reproductive health care than ever. But I believe that Judith's work, her numerous books, poems, zines, have opened the door to other artists and thinkers to tackle difficult topics that are normally cloaked in stigma and shame. And she reminds us that we can make a difference, that we can shift culture. We are not going back because I know that the culture around reproductive health has shifted through the storytelling and elevation of the voices of folks most affected by the multitude of laws regulating our reproductive lives. So, quite simply, we will not go back. So please give a round of applause welcoming my dear friend Judith. Thank you very much.
I brought my little clock up here because I've been very sternly admonished about time. Time. Okay, well, of course, thank you to Kate for that sweetness. And thank you to Planned Parenthood of the Columbia Willamette for inviting me to be part of your annual hoo-ha, this party that people keep referring to, and clearly it's a scene. One of the things I thought about when I discovered the location was having learned, I've only lived in Oregon for 25 years, so some of you know way more than I do, but I've been doing my homework. I like the fact that I've been invited to talk about abortion, specifically underground abortion work, here in downtown Portland, just a couple blocks away from some sidewalks. Well, these are probably newer sidewalks, but where even the old sidewalks were. Just about 100 years ago, 1915 and 1916, on two different occasions in those 2 different years, 3 extraordinary, indeed estimable women were arrested on those sidewalks because they insisted on talking in public to large audiences of eager listeners about contraception, birth control, family planning, about what came to be called, some years after that, Planned Parenthood. And who were they? In 1915, Emma Goldman came here to Portland to, big time, right? To say a few words, and got arrested for it, which she was not unfamiliar with as an experience. And the next year, almost on the same, certainly on the same block, people have told me, 2 women, another one brought in from out of town, Margaret Sanger, and local girl, Marie Equi, an MD, one of the very few female MDs, who was, of course, doing abortions. And remember, I'm talking about 1915 and 1916. So Sanger and Equi were arrested the following year. And I thought, okay, we're going to be right in the neighborhood. It's the right place to be. Moreover, once I started thinking about them, I thought, duh, what about Ruth Barnett? Ruth Barnett, who was probably Oregon's premier abortionist for, 4 decades, give or take? And all of this I'm talking about in the first half of the 20th century, when, of course, abortion was illegal, but thought about quite differently from the way it's been thought about in the last 45 years, for reasons I'm going to say a few words about, but you all understand. Ruth Barnett, I think about her often. Great commitment, great skill, and a great heart, and often cited in history books of the sort that folks in this room might be reading, like Ricky Solinger's book, The Abortionist, A Woman Against the Law. So because I am, as a couple people have already mentioned, it's so weird to sit there and hear people talk about you, a writer. I haven't been doing abortion work for a while, not lately. I write poems and stories, as Kate just noted. I'm going to read a poem, and then at the end, I'm going to read some prose, both of them short enough. The first one is specifically about the underground abortion service in Chicago. It's in a book called What If Your Mother? In the service, we said. In the service, we spoke clearly and distinctly. We said, "This is Jane from Women's Liberation. Please leave your name, your number, and a message. We'll call you back." When she did, we did. Then we said, "What was the date of your last period?" When we met to talk, we said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" When she said, "Yes," we said, "Syringe, speculum, dilator, curette." We said vagina, we said cervix, we said uterus, telling how to open it from the outside. Sometimes we had to say forceps, placenta, labor, trimester, hours, contractions, fetus. To each other, learning, we said, "It feels like the roof of your mouth, those ridges up in there. The curette scrapes along those ridges, spoon-like." We said, "You can feel the shape, like a textbook illustration. It feels just like the picture looks." That helps. Later, sometimes we said, "She was more afraid of the shot than anything." Or we said, "Her cervix was so tight, I thought I'd be there for an hour. My arm frozen, my shoulder numb, holding that dilator still." Lying there, some would ask, so we said, "No, we're not doctors. We're women just like you. We needed to know how, so we learned it. You know, just like you learn anything." And thank you. Thanks, folks. So the slogan, which we're all excited about, "We won't go back," I can hear it chanting like on a football field, is true because we can't. We, in this time, cannot escape the past 45 years of anti-abortion thinking and action that have come to dominate this country's reproductive health, reproductive decisions, and reproductive justice. We can't think like pre-Roe people, even those of us old enough to have been pre-Roe people, me, for instance. So one part of what I have to offer is the knowledge and experience of a time before this time. And another part is my own experience of what I think of as an organic synthesis that comes to everyone, even 4-year-olds, as we live, and that is the constant integration of the past and the present that's happening inside of us all the time. maybe I'll do this paragraph. I was thinking about stuff that other people have already said, but I'll say this anyway. I think that some of you know, though I find that many people do not, that the anti-abortion movement, with its vicious and/or ignorant ways of thinking about motherhood decisions and actions, did not exist in the pre-Roe years. Some folks think, especially when they say we won't go back, that it was worse in the mind of the nation. But my experience has been quite different from that. When I began doing what I thought of as research, as in the sense of returning to subjects that I hadn't thought about for a couple of decades in the latter part of the 1990s, one of the things I did was visit some abortion clinics here in Portland. And I was stunned at the extent to which the women and girls who came for their appointments were filled with shame and fear at a level I had never experienced when I was Janing. That's what we called it, Janing. And I, as you can see, I still haven't gotten over it. And I thought, what? And the answer to the what, is that was quite deliberately engineered. I don't know if the people who started up the anti-abortion movement actually thought about that and what a 16-year-old or a 41-year-old or a 29-year-old might be thinking or feeling, but that's what they did. Because the anti-abortion movement is a knockout success story, and most of its success has been money-driven and politically driven. Sometimes folks think about it as a sort of organic socio-cultural phenomenon, as if it had arisen from the people. But that's not true. That's not where it came from. Some people think it just came from a couple of very conservative churches, and they certainly have been busy. But it's about corporate money and political choices of the right wing, starting, of course, with Henry Hyde, with the Hyde Amendment, activated in '76, full on since '77. Again, I'm skipping stuff that other folks have dealt with. In the 1960s, early 1970s, there was a burgeoning anti-war movement, a rapidly rising feminist movement, much organizing and action among students, all of them learning from the actual decades-long intense struggle of the civil rights movement in the United States. And out of that political context, as well as thousands of years of abortion history and the much shorter history of the medical industry, the work of the Abortion Counseling Service of the Chicago Women's Liberation Union was generated. I realize that's a very long name, and you can understand why most people just call it Jane. We actually never called it Jane. We called it the service. So, in a galaxy far, far away, by which I mean Chicago, here's what happened. In 1965 or 66, a college student in Chicago, in her dorm room, a woman named Heather, got a phone call from a dear friend who told her that his sister was pregnant, very frightened, didn't know what to do, was really in a terrible state, and could she help? And he called Heather because she was a politically knowledgeable person. She, as she says now, had really never thought about it. It wasn't a subject that was on her list. But she gave it some thought, smart woman that she was, and she found an abortionist for her friend's sister. And very soon, word got around that she knew how to do it, how to find them, where they were, who they were, and their phone numbers. So soon, a lot of people were calling her, and she created the use of the pseudonym Jane, as in Jane Doe, or Jane Roe, as the case may be, to be relatively anonymous. The number of people who called her kept on growing. She realized the situation needed group action. She could not handle it alone. She had been one of the original organizers of the Chicago Women's Liberation Union. She called a meeting of some of her sisters in action, and they talked about it. A small group was formed. They decided to take it on, and they began as a referral service. They took Heather's list, and they used those numbers to give out. As far as they knew, no one, and they knew because of the calls back that they got from the women and girls who said, I went, this happened, etc. None of these guys, and they were, of course, all guys. Unlike in this time, there were virtually, and I say virtually, not totally, no women doctors. After all, Marie Equi in 1916. They found none of them had been sexually abusive. Some of them were even willing to bargain about the cost, which was, of course, exorbitant. So those guys stayed on the list. The referral service evolved into a counseling service, eventually into a clinic, mobile clinic, but a clinic, despite being illegal and underground. Women joined the service periodically through orientation meetings. I still remember mine. I joined in October of 1970. I was invited by a Jane, and part of the, I'm sure, people say to me, why did you do this? Lots of answers to that, but the most specific one in this context is I was told the address of the orientation meeting, and it was in a little church 2 blocks from my apartment. So I thought, okay, I'll go see about this. When you joined, you did basic stuff like taking the messages off the phone machine. And by the way, a phone machine was about the size of this lectern in 1970. And most of the women who called had never encountered one before. Some of them just hung right up. What's that? People got a little more savvy over time, of course. So we learned first how to do stuff like taking the messages off, and then other basic stuff, and then, of course, counseling, which is central and basic in a different way. And then ultimately, if you chose to, you could become a medic and do abortion. So how did that happen? This is how. We learned to do abortions from one man. He represented himself as a doctor, which of course many abortionists in that time did. Once we understood that so many abortionists were in fact not MDs, we thought, because we were smart, whoa, if he can do it, we can do it. That was an astonishing moment at a meeting of the Janes. Arguing, of course. We argued about everything that was important because you have to. If it's really, really important, every single thing that needs to be said must be said, whether it's a yes or a no or a well. Also, many of you may know, probably some of you definitely know, that anything illegal and financially successful will ultimately require a cut to the mob and payoffs to the police. Our man, this guy who was the best abortionist we ever worked with, he was not into giving them any of his money. And the phrase we would use, or was generally used about such situations, is he was on the run. And we argued back and forth, talked over a long time, and he was, of course, doing it for the money, which was not of interest to us except for getting equipment and medications and so on. Finally, he moved away because it was getting very dicey for him between the mob and the cops. He was nervous, appropriately nervous all the time. So he would fly back in, we would pick him up at the airport, take him to one of our homes, and then we would bring people to him where he would do, in a weekend, 50 abortions. And all of them well done with kindness. So we bargained with him about the money, we bargained with him about this, we bargained with him about that. Say, let us in the room, let us sit there, let us talk to the woman, we'll comfort her. And bit by bit by bit, we pushed through his resistance to this, in his mind, slightly zany and sometimes troublesome but extremely profitable bunch of women. And ultimately, he did teach one of us, and then the one he'd taught began to teach others. And he coached several of us. I still remember moments. He said to me, this, that. I don't have enough time to tell you all that, you know how when you listen to an old person say, and then this, and then that. I'm such a person now, but I don't have enough time for all of that. Once we had it down, really had it down, he just stopped flying in. And we did not have to send women to anyone else anymore. We also lowered the price, that was a great triumph, to $100 or whatever you could afford, which meant for some women it was free, for some women it was $47. Oh, am I gonna cry here in front of the microphone? For one, I remember very well, it was $9. She said, I think I can get $9. I said, sounds great. And it was, of course. I'm looking at the clock here. What else can I squeeze into my time? Oh, I think this is kind of cool. Not only was there this generic, not everyone, not everywhere, not all the time, generic positive thinking and feeling about abortion in this country, in most of the big cities, and even, yes indeed, rural areas, about abortion and why it should be allowed, why it should continue to be, as it had been for thousands of years, part of our lives when needed. That positive attitude was probably the main reason that we were able to continue doing illegal work. While so many people knew what we were doing. The phone number, for instance, was on easily, I would say damn near every college bulletin board and in women's dormitories in the Great Lakes region. And also, after a while, it was in the Women's Union's newsletter. And one of my favorite things, in the free weekly, the Chicago Reader, sort of like the Mercury Willamette Week kind of paper, there would be little notices that the union put out that said, pregnant, need help, call Jane, followed by the phone number. Of course, as you know, the anti-abortion people use this language for their fake clinics now, one of the uglier ironies of our time. In any case, I do like to say this, so I'm going to squeeze this in. The police, of course, knew about us. They always know, whether it was booze in the time of Prohibition, prostitution all the time, illegal drugs, illegal gambling. They always know. They always know. They generically. And so, of course, their wives and daughters and mistresses came to Jane because the cops knew that we were safe and that we treated them well. And similarly, doctors in the region, in the city, would send people to Jane. And of course, the clergy concerned guys. There were those groups in several cities in the United States. Our locals would send people to Jane and to other abortionists, excuse me, that they knew were good and reliable and safe and decent. We did get busted one time. And I don't have time right now to tell you the whole story. It was what I generally think of as a mistake. It was out of our neighborhood, a precinct where we had never worked, and those cops didn't know anything about us. In fact, when they busted in to the apartment where the abortions were being done, they said, "Where is he? Where's the guy?" which of course we weren't in a mood to be laughing, but later we thought, can you believe? And of course, we did believe. So they took everyone who was there in the place and everyone who was at the front, which was, of course, everyone who was waiting for the women and girls that they had brought, and some of them even little children, women who didn't have childcare brought their kids, and a friend was sitting with them while they were having their abortions done. So they wound up having like 45 people that they had to schlep downtown, first to the precinct in the neighborhood that was not our neighborhood, with the cops who they weren't, as we always said, these are not our cops. Again, I'm cutting. The service itself shut down for about 10 days, maybe 2 weeks after that bust, which was, by the way, in early May of 1972. And all the women who had appointments, who were waiting, who were literally on the list, which was about 250 women for the next couple of weeks, got done because the Janes found someone to do the work or were able to send them to Washington, D.C. or to New York, because before Roe, states had begun to legalize abortion, and in the District of Columbia as well, where there was a fine clinic or two. So we, the 7 of us, I was one of the people working on the day that the bust happened. The 7 of us, we did not go back to work, but the rest of the service did. It was only out of commission for, as I say, maybe 10 days, 2 weeks max. And no one from any neighborhood, our cops or these stranger cops, ever bothered them. Ultimately, the case was dropped, since none of the women who were there on that day for appointments wished to testify against us, and because our lawyer, a tough, smart woman, may she rest in peace or whatever she wants, made sure that the case stalled and stalled until the Roe decision in January of 1973. A few months after that, after arguing, of course, the service shut down in April of '73. Now I'm going to close my minutes by reading some prose, just a paragraph, don't worry. Don't be afraid of literature. I know some people are especially afraid of poetry, but we're past that part now. This is prose. This is a storybook. Oh, advertisement. This book, which is called Hello, This is Jane, is coming out in 3 months, and it's going to have its launch here in Portland at Broadway Books. And it's going to be on, thank you, it's going to be on May 3rd, the anniversary of the day that the cops cracked the service. My choice, of course, they didn't know that. Anyway, in this book, there are stories. At the end of one of the stories is this piece I'm going to read. This is a story that's in the future. Several people have talked about hope. One of the ways I, as a writer and as a Jane, am able to engage hope and hold on to it is to think about the future in our terms. And so I wrote this story about a little group of high school girls who, remember when Maya Lin won the prize for her design of the Vietnam War Memorial? That was all anonymous, of course, and no one knew who the people were who had created the designs, and it was, whoa, who's this, when Maya Lin won. Well, I made my girls, my characters, win a contest of that sort. They go to a high school in Waukegan, Illinois, these characters, and they won a contest for a memorial to women who have had abortions. And they had gone to what we would call a speak out. And here's the words of one of my girls, the teenage characters. She's talking about being at that event. She says, and near the end, right when we were leaving, one of them said, "We accept responsibility for our actions. We are responsible mothers who have seen many monuments to death and love, but not a one, never a one, that honors us. That was what she said, wasn't it? Right? That totally knocked us out. I mean, like, that just knocked us out because we used to be just so used to never getting credit, for anything. That was it. That started us thinking. So when Natalie found the contest, we were all over it. Know what I mean? We were just all over it. Thank you, folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith, for sharing your powerful story with us and for the work that you've done for women and people in your community. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. She knows firsthand the impact that Planned Parenthood has on the lives of young people in our community and will fight for progress for the next generation. Please join me in welcoming former PPCW Teen Council member Nadia Shure to the stage.
Hi everyone, my name is Nadia Shure and I'm a 19-year-old student at Portland State University. I'm also a Planned Parenthood supporter and a PPC Teen Council alumni. The first time I heard about Teen Council was when I was a sophomore in high school. Some Teen Council members from my school came into my class to teach, and what they talked about blew my mind. They talked about healthy relationships and normalizing sex ed. They made us get up and talk to other students about what we think about sex. They talked about STDs, how to protect yourself from them, how to get tested for them, and about the stigma surrounding them. We talked about their normalcy. We talked about how common this conversation is and how common it should be. It was the first time I'd ever heard people talk about like that in school. I immediately wanted to know them and be friends with them. So immediately I applied to become a Teen Council member, and I was accepted. I feel so incredibly lucky that I had this opportunity, and I really wish that there could be a Teen Council at every high school. Not a lot of people know that PPCW has an education department, and I want everyone to know that they do, because their sex ed program prevents so much stigma, and it prevents so many harmful misconceptions. Conversations about sex literally saves lives. And sex education literally saves lives. Right now, here in this room, I wish I could tell you everything I learned from the educators at PPCW in the 2 years that I was on Teen Council. I would tell you all about how relevant it was to have a space in which we could talk about healthy and unhealthy behavior. This helped me in more relationships than just romantic ones. How to talk to your friends and family about our different options for birth control and how we can access those. How to talk to your loved ones about sex and sexuality, how to be inclusive with your language and your actions, and the importance of consent, and how to ask for and give consent. They literally gave us specific examples of consent, and they defined the language around consent in more ways than just sexual. I learned a whole lot in Teen Council. I developed a sense of the things that I really cared about, and I built relationships with people who care about the same things that I care about. I learned how to get out of my comfort zone and engage with people. I learned how to protect myself from STDs, and I learned what my options for birth control was so that I could go into college and stay in college. In those 2 years, I made lifelong friends with people my age who want to make our community better. And that's something that everyone should have access to. And what I learned from Teen Council will stay with me for the rest of my life. I have to say, so will Judith's story. The story of the Janes is so inspiring. To me, it shows that when put in a horrible situation, people will take care of each other in the best ways that they know how. And they helped so many people and changed so many lives. But I'm not gonna lie, it kind of scares me to hear about what it was like before Roe v. Wade. It's scary to imagine not having a choice. And it's really scary to imagine a world where people can't access the care that they need, especially people who aren't rich, because those are the people who have the least access to power and resources in our society, and they are the ones who will be most affected. But even though it's scary, I have to agree with Anne. I choose hope, and I also choose action, because hope is more powerful than fear, and action makes change. I have hope because as a college student, I see young people acting for change every day, because there are a lot of people who are willing to learn and do better. And I have hope because I don't want to go back. I want to move forward. And I know all of you feel the same. I look around in this room and I see this huge crowd of people who are passionate and informed and want to increase access to care and education for everybody, and that fills me with so much hope. The world that PPCW believes in, where people of all identities and life circumstances have access to sexual and reproductive health care that they need, it's possible. And I believe that people my age, people old and young, play an important role in that world. And I believe that you do too. Right now, I'm asking you to stand with Planned Parenthood today. There's an envelope in front of every person in this room. Donors Samantha Richardson and Christine and David Vernier have generously offered to match all funds raised today up to $105,000. When you make your gift, please give as generously as you can and invest in Planned Parenthood, because they're investing in my community and in you and the people we care about, and so that they can invest in more communities. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for supporting PPCW. Thank you.
Excuse me while you're giving generously. For those of you that will be in town, we hope to see you at the Portland Women's March on Sunday, March 1st. It's at the PSU South Park Blocks downtown. And note that your program actually has a perforated cover, and you can use that as a sign for PPCW. Thank you so much and have a great afternoon.